Welcome to Back from the Abyss. I'm Dr. Craig Heacock. Today is Fishbowl number 4. I'm here with my dear friend, podcast collaborator, co-conspirator, Chris Johnson. Welcome.
Hello.
Number 4. Can you believe that?
I cannot believe it.
I know. Over 4 years ago, we were sitting in your basement conceiving this.
Yeah.
And you said, maybe we should just do one season.
We started with one season.
Yeah. And I remember when you said that, one season, I thought, being an enthusiast, I thought, really? Like, to me, that's like saying, maybe we could run 1 mile. Like, why can't we do thousands of episodes for years and years? And you said one season.
I'm cautiously optimistic, generally speaking.
Yeah. But I think that it was actually really wise. And you and I have talked about that a lot. And my memory is that you actually had thought of this, that in your basement years ago, you said, maybe we want to do one season. So we do a certain number of episodes and then we can take a break and we can say, do we want to keep doing this? Is this good?
Right.
Do we still have any ideas?
Right. Are we any good at it?
Are we any good? I remember a couple times in season 1, you saying, are you out of ideas yet? Are we almost done? Are there more ideas?
No, I did not.
I think you said.
All right, maybe.
But I have to say, like, as we finish season 4 now, I'm so grateful that we did seasons because, you know, as listeners know, I'm obsessively listening to podcasts, and almost no podcasts have seasons. And I think about these podcasters having to every week after week after week, or bi-weekly or daily. And I just think, how do you come up with good episodes, creative episodes? Because I'm scouring my brain often when I'm running, and I feel like I can come up with 20 episodes-ish, 19 a year, and then I need to go into a summer meltdown.
Well, I do think you probably should give yourself a little bit of a break because the podcast that you're talking about, that's their job probably, and they most likely have a whole staff to help them do that. But I agree. And you know, you told me before we started recording here that most podcasts don't have seasons, which I must not listen to as many podcasts as I thought because I assumed that just like a television show that they have seasons. Yeah. It makes sense to me. I like seasons.
I like seasons because one is, first of all, this Fishbowl. And for new listeners, Fishbowl means that Chris and I are in the looking glass. We're in the bowl. All of the listeners are outside watching us.
So this is our meta episode.
Get to hear the inner workings. But even thinking about Fishbowl, because you and I wrote some emails back and forth and talked, and it's really helpful to think about what happened this season, what went well, what didn't go well. Because a lot of times we're just, you and I are both busy and we're just cranking through stuff. And it's like, okay, we got another episode in 2 weeks. But this is our time to just say,
yeah, and what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah.
And what would be fun to do next season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think the season setup works to our advantage.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things you posited, and this is one of the things I love about you, Chris, is like you just lay it out honestly. You said, I wonder, are we evolving? Are we static? And I said, are we devolving? Like, are we, because the numbers are going up each season, which is fantastic. But are we getting better, or have we hit some kind of static point?
It's hard to, I'm just checking in. It's hard to know sometimes when you're doing this stuff how it's going. I mean, I know our numbers are going up, and I think we're doing a good job. But, you know, people around me are sort of chasing after this whole social media, short time spans of everything, the TikTok, the scrolling this, that, and the other thing. And I don't know, I don't subscribe to that, but is there some truth in people? I think there are two types of people. People who like and get comfortable with something that they're familiar with, and people who are always looking for the next, newest, best thing. Mm-hmm. And for what we do, in order to get your message across, maybe we have to compromise, or maybe there's a line in between those two types of people that we just should check in about.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one thing I really like that's evolved, I think we talked about this last year, is that, you know, the original idea with the podcast was just stories, you know, like The Moth, like psychiatry meets The Moth. But really now there's three kinds of episodes. There's stories, there's me talking about something, and then there's me sitting down with an expert, which, almost inevitably is someone in Colorado, someone I know, someone we can sit across the table. But I feel like that's made it fresher. I mean, I have to say myself, there's a few of my favorite podcasts that do the exact same thing every episode. They even ask some of the same questions at the beginning and end, like, oh, here they come.
Right.
Here come the book recommendations, or here comes where did you grow up? And, and there's something comforting about that, but I also find something really frustrating. And so I don't know what listeners think, but this is our podcast, so we get to decide. But I like each time, like, is this going to be another story, or do I get to talk about something that...
I think it's refreshing. I learn a lot from all of the episodes. Probably my personal favorite are the stories, but I'm not in your profession. My wife, on the other hand, looks to the podcast for professional advice. So some of her favorite episodes are the ones where you impart your wisdom as it applies to your profession. So I think I feel very good about the growth of topic areas that we've had over the last 4 years.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that there will be a Fishbowl in the future where we decide to shut it down. And the reason is because I think both of you and I are committed to doing something beautiful and something meaningful and something that's not just dialing it in. Again, we're not getting paid to do this. This is our garage band labor of love. So, I think you and I are on the same page that if when there's a point, I guess there will be a point that where we said, Back from the Abyss has reached its conclusion.
Right.
Not there yet.
Not there yet.
We're committed to do another season.
We haven't really talked about that. But
You're committed.
I'm committed.
You're committed. Why don't we morph into talking about what we learned this season, what was interesting this season, and I might just start with some ideas. I was thinking about this question, and actually what first came to my mind is a lot of what I learned this season came from all the listener emails, which I always forward on to you.
Yep.
And thank you, listeners. I love hearing your comments and your questions and your critiques, but just some of the things that have become abundantly clear is, number one, there are so many people seeking and not finding good care. And so I'm not surprised. I've spoken about this on the podcast, but there's a huge interest in psychedelics and a lot of therapists out there who are looking for specific advice and getting training. And again, I'm always happy to try to share advice when I can. When people write me for medical advice, I can't give medical advice. I mean, I sometimes give some very general kinds of things to think about, but and again, this is cool too. A lot of people want to share their story. And when we started Back from the Abyss, I thought this is a big ask. And will people want to come on here and talk about their darkest times? But I have a lot of people reaching out, and we'll talk about that a little later, some of the pluses and minuses of that. And then I guess just what's really clear this season is Back from the Abyss is now a lot bigger than you and me. For a lot of time, it just felt like you and me.
Yeah. For a long time it was.
Yeah.
And a few guests.
Yeah. But now there's a whole community, and we've had 90 episodes, a whole community of people who've been on this, who I run into them, and they're so grateful they told their stories. There's the people on the Front Range of Colorado that I've sat down with. It's really a community of people that I know and text me and reach out to me, and it's so cool that Back from the Abyss really is much bigger than you and me now.
It does feel that way. I really like it.
Yeah.
I mean, I like being part of it. I don't get recognized in public still, but I appreciate what you're saying. And Craig does forward the emails to me, so I get to see what you say also.
So if you're going to say anything negative about Chris, just know it. He's going to see it.
Oh, I'll see it. That hasn't happened.
No, people love you. Yeah. In fact, many people have asked, when's Fishbowl coming back? Here it is. Yeah. What about Chris for this season? I hate to talk about favorite episodes because, as I've said before in Fishbowl, like these feel like all my babies. Like,
Yeah.
number one, you and I both are very committed. Like, we're not going to release an episode unless we feel good about it. We're not like, okay, it's time to release something. Oh, here we go. Just put it out there.
Right.
No. But I wonder this in season 4 for you, were there episodes that you were particularly, I don't know, proud of, that were more meaningful to you, that were things that maybe stuck with you?
Well, I have a couple of ways to approach that question. From my part of this equation on the mixing and engineering side of things, the ones that stuck out to me this year were the ones that challenged me in the way that I do my workflow, which is kind of technical way of saying stitching everything together, I guess. But the very first episode of the season, Finding a Way Back to Each Other, was a mother-daughter story. And you recorded them separately and then asked if I could put them together. And that one was great because it was amazing how much overlap in the way that they answered your questions, which made it easier for me to do what I was doing. And it was such a fun process to hear that that overlap, because they obviously had given a lot of thought to their situation.
Mm-hmm. It was so fun for me to hear on my end after I'd done my editing. I was really wondering, when would you put music between mom and daughter, and when would you just go back and forth with their voices? And you did both. And there's a couple sound beds in there that were so beautiful. But it's interesting you mentioned that. That's one of the most compelling stories of this last season.
Yeah, and it hit on an emotional level too, which is also one of my favorites from that side of things, because that's the other. I have the technical side favorites, and then the stories, and that was one of my favorite stories also. I mean, it was an emotional story, to be sure, but it's just so real.
It is so real.
Yeah.
And I'd encourage listeners, if you haven't heard it, you may have seen the title like, oh, addiction, that's not my thing. This is really a story about being a parent and feeling so powerless and scared and overwhelmed. And what do you do when your kid's in a place of hurt and powerlessness and you just feel like you can't help them?
Yeah.
Like, how do you cope with that? And again, it could be mental illness. It could be anything. It just happens to be in this episode. It's addiction.
Very relatable.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other one that was similar in that vein was the Abortion in 3 Acts episode that we did. There were 3 separate stories from 3 different women, and they were all different. And putting those together, it was a similar kind of exercise, and I just loved the way it came out. I thought the stories were fantastic, eye-opening. That was one of the episodes, that topic was one of the episodes that we talked about last year's Fishbowl, I think. So it was nice to have that.
I think you suggested that topic.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
And I thought you did a great job, and the women who came forward and told their stories, including your wife, Elizabeth, they were great stories, hard stories, but it was done. I think we did a really nice job.
Yeah. It sounded beautiful. They told such amazing stories. And again, listeners, with abortion in the title, I was wondering, will anybody listen to this? Because it's such a painful topic, no matter how you feel about abortion. But for those of you who haven't listened to the Abortion in 3 Acts episode, I think you'll be really struck by the power of it. And I think by the balance of it. We tried really hard not to have any political agenda, just to say these are 3 women and 3 stories, and just.
And we're recording this before the last episode of the season airs, but the other part of this that you will have probably heard by now, as you're listening to this, is the conversation that you and Wayne had relative to that episode, which is another thing that didn't used to happen, but now does, is that there is real-time feedback with guests about previous episodes that I think is really neat. So that was my second one. Can I tell two more?
Yeah,
Let's
please
see.
do.
I really liked The Way Out of Psychosis. It was a hard story to listen to, but it was a glimpse into something that thankfully most of us don't ever get to experience. So I thought that was extremely interesting and well done. And I also loved the trauma and transference episode. I think I told you at the time that it was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. You know, I couldn't help but feel Alexandria's pain and suffering that she was going through, but it also gave me a glimpse into what you do and how you do it and what you have to do. That I, even after working together for a while and being friends for a long time, I didn't really know. And it was extremely touching. So that was my other.
Yeah, that was like take your listener to work day.
Yeah.
On a really, really hard work day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciated that very much.
Yeah, thank you. I have to say I'm kind of surprised when I look back on this last season. 3 of the episodes that were really meaningful for me were 3 where I sat down with friends/experts, because I was really determined to make Back from the Abyss different. And I thought, okay, I don't want to just talk to experts because that's what all podcasts do. Like today we have famous person A or expert B. But it turns out that there's a reason that people have experts on podcasts. It's actually interesting. But selfishly, I just love to connect. I love to sit down with people. And, years ago, we talked about this in Fishbowl. I really wanted all these episodes to be in person, sitting across from the table, kind of, Rich Roll or Joe Rogan style, not doing Zoom or video. But it turns out that in the Front Range of Colorado, there are some amazing people who are just up and down I-25. And so, Will Vanderveer and Jeremy Sharp and Kelly Sonnenfeld, I mean, they are 3 amazing people and experts, and sitting down with them for each of those episodes was so fun.
Yeah.
I just love each of them so much. And I learned a lot, and I think listeners learned a lot.
Yeah, and they were interesting. I mean, even for folks like me, I guess, that are, again, not in the profession, it's a pleasure. I said this last year, I think, when you talked to Jeremy Dubin. It's just refreshing to hear two professionals who really know what they're talking about talk reasonably about a topic. There's no shouting or debating or any of that. There's just a good discussion, educational discussions.
Thank you. What about story or season 5 ideas?
Are we going to go back to some of the episodes that maybe didn't show up on our favorite lists before we move on?
We could.
I mean, is it a coincidence that the psychedelic episodes didn't make it to our lists?
Oh, that's an interesting statement. Yeah, say more.
Well, I can't say that I didn't like those episodes, but it did spark some conversation between us about where that type of information sits in the overarching goal of the podcast. They're definitely popular. We know that. We know by looking at the numbers that there is a huge interest in information revolving around THC and the mushrooms that were recently legalized in Colorado. The last episode, you mentioned a study about LSD and anxiety. We've talked about MDMA. These are all cutting-edge medicines that I personally think are interesting and have a place, but they also have a tendency, because they're so new and the information is the data is not yet out there, I think, it brings up it brings out different sides of the story, right?
Yeah.
Am I right about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think because number one, I'm deeply interested in psychedelics, and I think they are and will bring a lot to mental health and psychiatry. And, as you just alluded to, like if we change the name of this podcast to Chris and Craig's Mushroom Show, and we just had mushroom episodes, we would probably have way more downloads. But I think we would get bored, and that's actually not the goal of this was to talk about psychiatry through stories. Mm-hmm. And but we do get way more downloads with the psychedelic episodes. But one thing I've been trying really hard not to do, and you've been really good check on this, is I'm trying not to be kind of a mindless cheerleader for anything. Because you could definitely hear on some of the podcasts in general, but definitely some of the psychedelically oriented podcasts, this sort of like positive feedback loop of like, guest, this is so amazing. And the host, whoa, that's so great. And that guest, like, this changed my life. And I was like, wow. And it's just this whole like happy feed. Like
that happens in, because we live in Colorado, we've personally experienced this maybe in ways that people who listen to this show in other parts of the world have not. Mm-hmm. And we've sort of seen firsthand that, at least for me, I'll speak for myself on the cannabis issue. I stand by the fact that I think it should be legal. But there was sort of the cheerleading aspect that happened early on that sort of smoothed over some of the rough edges that you've definitely alluded to, and I've learned from your work how some of that may not be as great as everyone says it is. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that it's not great for a large number of people, but you're right. I think we need to be very careful about how it's presented and that both sides of the story are. And I think we do that for the most part.
Mm-hmm. And I think you've been so good. Like after the ketamine versus psilocybin versus MDMA episode, you called me and you just said, hey, I just want to make sure, are we promoting illegal drug use? Are we glorifying that? Are we being ethical? He said, I'm not saying we're not, but I love that. You just put that out there. And I actually listened to some of that or sections of that interview again. And I decided, no, I think it's okay. But because I actually want to be exactly on that same page.
I know you.
Yeah. And that I want Back from the Abyss to be a place where people can come. I say get the real scoop. I mean, obviously, there is a significant percentage of what you and I believe that's completely untrue. And 20, 40 years from now, we'll look back and think, wow, how did we believe that in 2023? But right. I don't want to be us to be cheerleaders or on some bandwagon. I want us to, again, where, I'm a clinician, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a journalist, but I do want to give sort of the hopeful skeptic's view.
Yeah, and I appreciate that very much. And where that phone call for me came from less about the natural substances that we're talking about. If you can plant it at home, I think that, and it's ancient medicines that have been used and proven. Where I get a little more concerned is when we start talking about underground therapies with synthetic drugs, mm-hmm. especially in light of fentanyl issues. And so I was concerned, and I don't think that it's our job to have to put a warning label on any of these things. But at the same time, do we have an obligation to at least mention the fact that you're taking some risks by purchasing medicine that you're getting from unknown sources? Mm-hmm. I mean, it really boils down to that. That, and also my own personal recent experiences that, everyone says, take these medicines and, be better. Well, I took some of these medicines and they didn't agree with me so much.
I think you are better. Maybe not because of them.
Well, I'm just saying that I think that you hit it on the head earlier when you said there's so much enthusiasm for the potential that sometimes we lose track that it's not a one size fits all. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. And I think, there's a couple things that are pulling back from the abyss into the psychedelic zone, which one is, the downloads are much higher on psychedelic oriented episodes. And I'm trying really hard not to get focused on metrics because, again, this is not for money.
Right.
But the other thing is, in the first couple seasons, most of the storytellers were my patients. And I kind of handpicked people who I thought were really great to tell a story of anorexia or of meth addiction or schizophrenia. But the last couple of seasons, it's been mostly people approaching me, which is fantastic. Like Back from the Abyss has gotten bigger than us. But I would say 90% of the people who reach out to me want to talk about a psychedelically themed thing, whether it's an expert, it's a book, it's a personal experience, it's a journey, it's a trauma healing. And I really want to keep psychedelics as, a piece of the Back from the Abyss pie. But again, this is Back from the Abyss psychiatry and stories. And most of what I do in my work with people is not around psychedelics and probably won't even be in 10 years. A lot of it, what I do with people is just sitting and trying to hold their pain and connect. And I think the Wayne episode 2 weeks ago showed that well, or the Alexandria episode. But boy, everything is pulling to having this be Back from the Abyss, all psychedelics all the time.
I do think, just maybe as a counter to my own concerns here, is that, with your ketamine work and the stories that we've heard from people, that seems to be moving more into a mostly undisputed tool in the toolbox to help people with very specific mental health issues. Is that is that fair to say?
Right. Ketamine is a proven, it's a proven treatment. We know that for certain kinds of depressive illness and certain presentations of PTSD, et cetera, that the ketamine is as good or better than anything we got.
Right.
That's clear.
And it's interesting to me that ketamine gets put into, is it technically a psychedelic substance?
Well, yeah, the word psychedelic means mind manifesting, and a ketamine experience is unbelievably mind manifesting. But it's not a classic serotonin 2A tryptamine psychedelic like DMT or LSD or psilocybin. So I guess it depends if you're a lumper or a splitter. I tend to be more of a lumper. I would call ketamine a very powerful psychedelic.
Okay.
Personally.
All right.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts for me, Chris, on how to think about choosing people to be on the podcast? Because again, the first season or two was more me kind of handpicking people, sort of looking for a certain kind of niche or position or story. But now there's so much coming my way.
Yeah.
And it's great. Like I love that there's so many people that listen and are interested, but sometimes I think, wow, I didn't know I was going to be like a casting agent.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's both flattering that people are coming to you now where they, weren't before, obviously, but I don't think you have nearly as much control over the situation. And by that, I just mean there's a lot of reasons for somebody to want to tell their story. And before, when you had your clients on the show, you had a history with them and knew, for the most part, why they wanted to be on the podcast and what was driving their motivation. Now, not so much, right? So you're getting cold calls from people and you're having to make decisions just based on a few meetings or a few phone calls. Mm-hmm. And it's different from the expert side of things. I think that that's a lot easier. Mm-hmm. You can sort of Google someone these days and see about their reputation and view their work, whether it's their own podcasts or books or YouTube videos or whatever. But with people who want to tell their personal stories, I don't know. How are you picking people?
Well, I guess I was just thinking about that after I asked you that. I think I still hold this ideal in my head that the best stories are like the best stories of season one. The best stories are Elizabeth, are Ellie, are Chris, like those first few episodes that had nothing to do with Instagram likes or selling a book or running a retreat center or trying to build a shamanic practice or something. Like these were people who, when we talked about coming on the podcast, each of them said, yes, I think it would be really meaningful and helpful for me to tell my story.
Yeah.
And so I think I still try to hold to this ideal that the people who are telling their stories, that their primary motivation would be that they want to share what they've been through to try to help people out there who might go through or have been through something similar. Like that's the primary motivation.
So the people that you mentioned from the first season, it was my impression, and I think it's an accurate one, that they were pretty ill for some period of time. And I'm wondering if you, because you knew that obviously because you were treating them, I'm not so sure that those people, the people who might have similar illnesses without the personal connection to you, would be the ones calling you up.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because first of all, it's a big ask because, we record in person. I mean, I have gone to meet people other places, but usually it's here in Fort Collins. So for someone to reach out to me who doesn't know me, who has, really serious psychiatric illness, and it just trusts me enough just by hearing my voice in the podcast, but it's going to come here, maybe have a few phone calls with me, drive up here, record with you. Right? That is a huge ask.
It sounds scary to me, and I don't have I'm fairly healthy.
Yeah. That said, I've had, like the episode, the psychosis episode from this season. That man lived on the East Coast, and he reached out to me through LinkedIn, and he said, "Well, I live on the East Coast." And it turns out I was going to the East Coast, so I took all my recording equipment, and that was one of the most powerful experiences of recording anything that we've done. And that was someone who just reached out to me, heard of me. We had spoken on the phone, but I just showed up in this eastern city and met him, and we sat down and recorded that.
Right.
And he just spilled his heart.
I'm asking this for the listeners now because I know the answer, but have you had people approach you where you've met with them and recorded something and it hasn't gone well?
Yes.
Oh, you have?
Yes.
Oh, I thought I knew the answer to that. Was it based on what we're talking about, where you just didn't know enough about how it was going to, you didn't know them personally?
No. Well, the one episode that I recorded and couldn't use was a man who had been through a terrible psychosis. And he was going to tell his journey out of that. But it turns out that I wasn't able to tell from my brief phone calls and emails how thought disordered he still was. And we recorded the episode, and I couldn't use it because his thinking was so disorganized, and it didn't make sense. And even after a lot of recording and a lot, do-overs and practicing with the recording off and then having him do it, he couldn't do it. And it was...
Was that disappointing?
He was really disappointed, and I felt so sad and guilty. And the last thing I wanted to do was to feel like I'm putting someone on the spot and then they couldn't do it. I thought maybe I could salvage some of it, but I went back and listened to it, and it really wasn't salvageable. It just didn't make sense. So I think what had happened, he'd had such a severe psychotic episode. I had thought he'd mostly recovered, but it turns out he still had some pretty serious lingering thought disorder and other kinds of executive functioning problems.
Did that change the way you think about how you interview other guests?
Yeah, it made me since then, I've had much longer phone conversations with people. He and I didn't speak on the phone that much. We emailed a lot, and it turns out he was a good writer, but he just couldn't do it verbally in person. But, now for people I don't know, I try to really have at least 2 pretty extended conversations on the phone to really listen to how people, how they talk, like how their thought processes, can they explain the difficulties? Because it's one thing to be eloquent or a good writer or a good storyteller, but to talk about your darkest times and your hardest stuff, I mean, that's hard for any of us.
Yes.
So it's a big ask. So more and more, I mean, I've been doing this all along, but now I insist that anybody who's going to come on and tell their story, that they do pretty extensive journaling before, and they share journal entries with me. We talk back and forth. Like again, I've alluded to this on prior Fishbowls. There's a lot of preparation time that goes into before we even sit down to record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you, one last question on this, if you don't mind, have you gone through this sort of more rigorous interview process and decided someone was not right for the show?
Yes. In terms of, I have a couple times people I thought they just weren't stable enough, or they had a hospitalization or breakdown that was too close. I recently had a listener and therapist who we had her episode all planned out. She was going to come and record, and then she called me. She said, I just am so fearful that my family would hear, even with changed names. And, we usually use pseudonyms and change, details of stories. And I said, great. I said, this has to be your thing.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that's nice that this isn't for profit. We're not having to crank this out on a schedule, that, we can ask people to do this from a place of kind of altruism and I think good ethics, and not like we need your story by next Tuesday, or
right.
We're not going to get our advertising revenue.
There's no pushing.
And, and I've had probably over the 4 years, I've had 3 people bail before the recording. Just said, I just, for whatever reason, it's just not right. And I praise them. I congratulate them. I said, good. That sounds exactly right.
Yeah.
In fact, if anything, I would say when I ask people, especially my own patients, I don't let them answer right away. I said, give this a couple of weeks. And I really try to talk them out of it.
I try to test them to see if, not maybe test, but give them sort of go the opposite way and say, maybe,
Like I'll ask, like, who would be the worst person on the earth to hear your story? And they're like, oh, my dad. I'm like, well, let's just run through. Let's imagine your dad hears this. Like, what would that be? Because we have no idea, once this is out, we have no idea who's going to hear it. So I do take this really seriously. I had a listener write recently and said, choosing people for the podcast and putting them in these really difficult situations, is that ethical?
Right.
How do you do that? And she was questioning my methods. And I wrote her back and said, look, I take this really seriously, and I have a whole bunch of questions and stops and breaks, and you're another one too. I mean, whenever I bounce things off you, I know that you're going to give me a 2,000% honest answer.
For better or for worse.
For better or for worse, yeah. What about season 5 ideas? Let me just throw one out there, Chris. I just love this. You and I were talking on the phone, I think a few weeks ago, and I don't know what got us on this topic, but maybe one of us had been in Denver and some other big city, but the fact that there are not just homeless people all over the streets of big cities, but very, very mentally ill.
Yes.
And often psychotic, and that's true in Denver. I was in LA recently. I told that story in the podcast. I was in San Francisco last year, same thing.
Oh, yeah.
And you said, I love this idea. You said, what if you try to talk to someone who is trying to work on this?
Yeah.
Sort of the expert idea.
Yeah, I love this. Somebody told me, I'm trying to remember now how it came up, but somebody was talking about that the vast majority, and I don't know the statistic off the top of my head, but the vast majority of homeless people also suffer from mental illness. And there was the conversation, well, we should just take this solution, provide them more care. There's a politician in California, scoop them all up and relocate them to somewhere, and all of these points of discussion. I don't know. I've never heard this topic talked about with somebody in mental health. Mm-hmm. I think we probably all have, at this point in our lives, been someplace where you don't really know the state of people, and you can tell that there are some mental health issues out there. So I think it's a topic that affects a lot of us. Mm-hmm.
It might be like a two-parter. There's so much to it.
I think there's a policy part of it that would be interesting to talk to. I think it would be interesting to hear from you and other psychiatrists in terms of what's reasonable to expect. Why are people with mental illness homeless? Mm-hmm. And is there a way to provide, just providing them a tiny house in downtown LA, does that solve the problem or not? Mm-hmm. I don't know, but I do think it's probably a good topic for the podcast.
Yeah, I love it too, because, Back from the Abyss has been very focused on individual stories and topics, but this is more of a social level thing. And, what we often don't realize, we're all in our own fishbowl. You and I are in the fishbowl right now, is that this is not the way most countries do it. Like if you go to Europe or Japan or Scandinavia, you don't see yelling, psychotic, scary people just wandering the streets like you do in Denver and San Francisco and LA and New York. You don't
Fort
see
Collins.
that. Yeah. And that's because in most other countries of the world, there are hospitals and the police or mental health workers will pick up these people and they take them to a hospital and they treat them. And sometimes they treat them involuntarily. Mm-hmm. But they give them treatment. And, what happened in the U.S. decades ago is they closed all the big state psych hospitals and they deinstitutionalized. And now, as a psychiatrist, I never treat these people because I have a private practice. Who treats the homeless, mentally ill? If they get treatment at all, it's the jail doctors. Because, where are most of the really seriously ill mentally people in the U.S.? They're either homeless or they're in jail or prison.
Yeah.
They're not in hospitals.
No.
And that no other developed country in the world does that. So I love that idea for season 5 that we would explore a little more this thing that we just take for granted that, in the cities there are out of control psychotic people who are going to yell at you and threaten you. And that's just what happens.
Is this, we haven't done this in the past, but given the conversation we had just previous to this, if anyone's listening and this is their area of expertise.
Yeah, we'd love that.
Yeah. Maybe reach out.
Even better if you're in Colorado.
Even better if you're in Colorado.
Take a ski vacation to Colorado. Expert on this, and come see me.
Yeah, it's beautiful in the fall too.
Yeah, it is beautiful in the fall. I know next year I'm going to do an episode on grief and psychedelics. I've had a few listeners suggest that, and I have that planned. I've also had a few listeners ask about internal family systems, and we're going to look at that.
What do you mean by that?
Internal family systems is a specific kind of therapy, particularly used for trauma. It uses this idea that we have parts, that the self is made up of different kinds of parts, and it's speaking to these different parts and how they live in the body and how they sort of manifest in the kind of a tortured, unintegrated psyche. Yeah. I also want to look next season a little bit more about how to find treatment. Because again, I get so many emails about that. Like how do I go about trying to find treatment?
This goes back to what you were saying, one of the things you learned this season.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and then another one, and Chris, this was your idea. I think it was about a year ago, you brought up this story of a good friend of yours who has a stepson who's struggling with some pretty serious mental illness, and he and his spouse didn't know what to do. And you asked me if I had any thoughts on that. And I think I kind of, off the top of my head, came up with this LLL thing, like, they and other families with a mentally ill or addicted family, they have the power of their loot, of their love, and of the law. And, the power of love is real, but I think as someone gets really, really ill with addiction or mental illness, I think the love is less important, and that often moves to loot, number 2. And what often happens, I think, when people have a family member who has serious mental illness and or addiction, and they're unwilling or unable to seek help, the family ends up enabling them because they're so scared that they're going to kill themselves or kill someone else or disappear, or go to prison. And so a lot of what I'm doing sometimes with families is trying to help them use their loot, use their money in healthy ways and not support anything that's particularly unhealthy. And then the third one is the law. And as I spoke about a few minutes ago, this is what happens in many countries of the world, is that how very ill people get into treatment often is the law. Although in the US, you get taken to jail. In most of the other developed countries of the world, it might be the cops picking you up, but they take you to a hospital and you're treated by physicians and psychiatrists and you're given medicine and you're not locked up in jail.
Yeah. So horrible. In my case, and just to be clear, we're talking about someone who is young. They're technically an adult. They're over the age of 18. So the parents do not have any legal rights for some of this stuff. So, the appealing with love, by that you explained to me of if one of the tactics to take is if you love me, you will see a doctor and take meds once a week because you love me and I want this for you. And with loot, as you explained, it was if you want to continue driving a car that I pay insurance for, you will see your doctor and take your meds once a week, or whatever the case may be. And where I came to you was those two things aren't working. Mm-hmm. This person is sick in a way that they don't respond to the love or the loot in that way. And it is a tough choice then to be the third option is I don't know how parents could be expected to do it. And so this issue of working of how, what are some options, what are some strategies given the constraints of having an adult family member who can't or won't seek their own care?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that reminds me of family that I treat. Their young adult son been in and out of very violent, scary psychosis. And the only thing that convinced him to get into treatment and to get on a monthly injectable antipsychotic was they got him an apartment and a car. And that was my idea. Because they had given him all that, and then he crashed the car and went to jail a few times and was basically homeless. And I said, maybe the power of your loot can encourage him. At first, he wouldn't do it, but after a few months of being homeless in and out of jail, he agreed. They got him a nice apartment and a car, and all he has to do every month is get his antipsychotic shot with me. And he's played ball since. But again, this is someone who agreed to that. But there are a lot of people that are so sick, you're right, that even that carrot approach of money isn't enough.
And just out of curiosity, in that case that you just mentioned, does the son then is able to keep a job?
Part-time.
Part-time.
Yeah, school part-time. But what's interesting is he does have enough insight now that he's stable and on an injectable antipsychotic that he can say, this is good for me.
Right. And
yeah. I'm glad I'm doing this. And, and I think that's what I think a lot of people don't realize is, when we see all these homeless, ill, chaotic people, we many of them, if we could get them on the right antipsychotic, they would be able to say, oh, this was
self-aware.
This was a good idea. I'm glad that these people picked me up off the street and took me to a hospital and treated me rather than, they took me to the LA County jail and they put me in the psych unit with essentially no treatment and locked me up and then released me and I went back out on the street, which is,
that sounds like it would make the problem worse.
Yeah, which is what so much of psychiatric care for the seriously ill in the U.S. looks like.
Well, it'd be an interesting topic to explore next season for sure.
Yeah, we're definitely going to do that. on a lighter note, maybe a fun wrap-up question. I was thinking, because I feel so much gratitude for you. We've become such good friends, and I really couldn't do this without you. I know I say that to you a lot. You're like, yeah, you could, but it would not be anything like it is. And so I was thinking about what I most value in you, both as a friend and a fellow podcaster collaborator. And I think the biggest thing is you are really funny, even when you're telling me something painful. I can listen to you, and sometimes I think, oh, that was hard to hear. Like, but you're really funny, and there's something, and I love your honesty, because it takes a special friend to tell someone what's really up. But you can, and you will give me a softball, like, are you ready to hear this? Do you want to hear this? And sometimes you'll say it in a very funny way. Or there's been times that things on the podcast that you really didn't like, but rather than just go after them, you often went in with humor. And I love humor. I think it's just such a great way to talk about the hard stuff.
I'm glad that you saw some of my comments funny. Sometimes I'm a little nervous because it's obvious what you're talking about, and it's a little intimidating to offer advice to someone when you're at a little bit of a disadvantage in terms of the subject matter, for sure.
Mm-hmm. But you have beginner's mind, which is that, I'm so in this, and I've talked about this on Fishbowl before. I'm so in it that sometimes it's really hard for me to be objective. And, there are a number of episodes where I send it to you and I say, Chris, I need your objectivity, because I'm just so deep in this. And
yeah.
I don't feel like I can listen to this in the way it needs to be listened to. I need you to have a fresh mind and honest, and hopefully if you have something painful to say it in a humorous way.
I get the easy job, which is you do all the heavy lifting, and then I just run it through and give you my opinions on stuff. I mean, I don't know. I'm glad that you appreciate my opinions on that. It's been, it's super fun to be able to do that. And part of the reason I give you information in the way that I do is that I know that you'll take it for what it's worth. And I also know that if you don't like it, you won't take it. Mm-hmm. Quietly. You won't debate it, or, it's not a thing. It's just, I give you what I think, and you decide what you want to do. And I appreciate that. I'd say one of the things, this goes back to the very beginning of the podcast today, is that going back to the 4 years ago or 3 years ago in the basement when we were talking about this, I said, let's do one season. What I like about you is that you don't think like that. You think, let's do it for 100 years right out of the gate. There is no, you're fearless in a lot of ways that I am not. And it's refreshing to work with someone who doesn't have the sort of chirping in the back of the head all the time of, are you sure we should be doing this? Is this the way we should go? It's just full steam ahead. It's absolutely the way we should go. Let's do it a long time, and let's do it, better and more.
Yeah. And I love too that we have merged around this idea that quality, not quantity.
Yeah.
Because I think it was you. No, actually, maybe it was Antonio Zachary who first recommended that we do this every 2 weeks. That was the best advice ever, because I just think if we did this more frequently, it would just feel like...
I don't know how you could do it more frequently, honestly. I mean, with the front load of the interviews and prepping the questions and, all of that, it's just, I know you put a lot of work into the podcast.
Yeah. I kind of have 3 jobs, because I'm a psychiatrist, full-time psychiatrist, and I run all the time. This is funny.
That's not a job.
No, it is a job. No, it's a fun job. As I was falling asleep last night, and I'm getting a little hard of hearing, I thought my wife said, "You run funny." And I looked at her. I was like, "What?" She said, "What?" I said, "I run funny." She said, "No." I said, "You run plenty." And so I thought, "Oh, okay, I run plenty."
That is true.
But I thought after 34 years, she's finally telling me I run funny.
Oh, that's funny.
I know, but really...
What if it was true?
Oh, I know.
Like, what if you were like one of those guys that just has the funniest gait,
Yeah. And then I have one paid job and I have two other, yeah. I run all the time and but this is so fun that we do this together. Like this is,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, my name's on the podcast. It's about psychiatry. I'm a psychiatrist, but I remember after season 2, we were out having a beer and talking about doing another season. And you said you were kind of burned out. It was COVID, and you're like, I don't know, like maybe I'm out. You could find someone else to do this. And I was like, I don't want to do it with anyone else. Like,
very sweet.
And you said you could pay someone else. I was like, I want you. I said, if it's not you, I don't want to do this anymore because like this is a co-creation. So
it's nice to be on a team that is working well.
It is nice to be on a team that's working well.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Or are we signing off here?
I think we're good.
Okay, a couple final announcements. I'm going to be at Psychedelic Science in Denver next month in June. Me and 9,999 of my closest friends. And if you see me, if you recognize me, come up and say hi. I would love to chat, love to meet you. It's so fun to meet people who listen to Back from the Abyss. And so don't be shy. And I'm going to be recording a couple episodes there. And we're planning to put out a midsummer special like we did last year. And then we'll be back in the fall with season 5. I love the number 5. It's one of my favorite numbers. It seems like an auspicious number for good things.
I know that about you. If you do see Craig, you'll know by his funny walk.
If you see me running to a session, you'll say,
yeah,
he runs funny.
That must be Dr. Craig Heacock.
Hey, do you run plenty or you run funny? Plenty. All right. Great to be here.
Yeah.
Adios.